Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome someone who's a poet, memoirist, essayist, filmmaker, and producer of the film After Poetry Destroys Silence. Please help me welcome Janet Kirchheimer. Janet, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here.
Well, before we get too far into it, I always like to start by going back with people. So let me start with that. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Connecticut on a farm, actually.
On a farm, really?
Yeah, chicken farm.
Oh, that's very cool. So
Yeah.
let me see if I was reading about you. So you're the daughter of Holocaust survivors.
Correct.
Right. So let's talk about them. First, your father. I was read that he was arrested in Kristallnacht.
Yes.
And sent to Dachau. Could you share more about that and what you learned from him about that time?
Sure. So my father was born in a small village in southern Germany called Niederstetten. Mm-hmm. And he, life was pretty okay. Of course, there was anti-Semitism. It wasn't perfect. But after Hitler came to power, his father and other men were arrested and beaten to a pulp until they passed out. They were made to stand in front of fireplaces and wood stoves, and they were told, to get out. And the problem was, as I'm sure everyone who's listening to this knows, that the world wasn't accepting many refugees. And my father had applied for a visa in 1936 to get out to then Palestine, now Israel. Mm-hmm. He studied at the Kirchheimer yeshiva in Berlin. He, they learned very practical knowledge. And he was trying to get out. And he also learned to be a tool and die maker. And when he came back, he wasn't able to get out. He was one of 6 children, and one had gotten out earlier to then Palestine, and 2 got out to New York. And on Kristallnacht, he and his mother, his father, his older sister, his younger brother, hid in the basement of their home because of all the rioting. And there was, at least 100 synagogues were burned, businesses. No, I'm sorry, not 100. 100 people were killed. The numbers vary widely, but, there was mass destruction. The next morning, he was ordered to report to town hall. And he went in and he just said to them, what for? What did I do? I'm only 16 years old. And the gendarme who was in charge, this area had a lot of French language influence, so the local police was called the gendarme. And he said he really didn't care. He had a job to do. He had 10 men to arrest, mignon. And he said, if you don't like it, you can go home. We'll arrest your father instead. And his father was in the next room paying his tax bill. So my father told me that he just didn't say anything anymore. He didn't let his father know he was there because he was afraid his father would want to take his place. He was afraid they'd arrest him also. So he and 10 other men were arrested, put on a truck. On the trailer, on the back of the truck, it said, drink Coca-Cola. And, just the idea of everything that Coke stood for and happy and all these other things. And a woman, I have that picture because a woman came out and took pictures of what was going on. And my father saw this woman and he put his head down. So that's the picture I have. He has a cap on, and all the other men, were well over 20 and wore hats, but he had a cap on. And they were taken to a county jail and they were kept there. They asked for, food that was in some way kosher. They were not getting kosher meals. And someone had told one of the jailers about the food that they were asking for. And he said, don't worry, in 2 days, they're going to Dachau. So that is, and he gets to Dachau, and there are lines. He told me there are lines everywhere. There are people standing, mostly all men, standing in line to have their head shaved, standing in line to put their clothes in, to whatever objects they had, and then standing in line to get not a shower, but hoses turned on them. And he gets to the line where you're being signed in, and they said to him, your name, your age, and your address. And then they had occupation. And the capo, those administrative prisoners who were in charge of that, didn't know what to put. So he wrote down student. And I do have a copy of that page. When the United States Army liberated Dachau, they took that book. It's called the Zugangsbook, the sort of registration book. And one of the capos said to him, you're young to be here. When you stand in line for the shower, be careful, because don't open your mouth, because if you do, you're going to swallow water from the hoses, and the SS is going to get a kick out of it. And he said, they're just kids. They'll laugh. So those were the, those kinds of things. And he shared a bunk with a man who froze to death one night. And the next morning, a capo came in, and, my father told him that this man had died. And he said, take off his long underwear and wear it, because you'll freeze at night if you don't. And he took the long underwear and he washed it, because his family had the custom that you don't wear clothes from a dead body. So he washed it, and then he told me he slept on it in a chair. He had it hanging over a chair, and he slept on it while it was still wet, so no one else would steal it from him. Right. And this is just I have a poem called Breaking Laws, and that it's about that, and about all the laws of humanity and things that got broken.
And your mother escaped too, right? Your mother was...
Yes, my mother was also born in Germany, a town called Fulda in the Hessen area. My parents used to joke they came from two different areas, so it was an intermarriage. And she, things were okay when she was... This was in 1936. She was about almost 6 years old at the time. And the kids in her first grade class backed her up against a wall at school and threw rocks at her and screamed, Juda, Jew, and beat her up. And her principal brought her home and said to her parents, I can't protect your daughter anymore. So she couldn't go to school anymore. And it took a long time, but they were able... I'm sorry, I got it wrong. The school year, it was around 1935. And so by 1936, they were able to get her out of Germany to Amsterdam, to the Israelitische Mädchens Weeshuis, which is a Jewish girls' orphanage in Amsterdam. They had a relative who had gotten out earlier to Amsterdam and was able to arrange a place for her. And so she waited there for 2 years until her parents got visas to America.
Wow.
My maternal grandmother my Oma had a brother who came to America in 1907. So he was finally able to arrange for visas. And in the orphanage, my mother said every morning, the woman in charge, Frau Frank, who was the head mistress, gave them cod liver oil every morning. And she said it was healthy for them. And there were 104 girls in the orphanage. 4 survived. And my mother was the last the last of the survivors.
Unbelievable! Wow, unbelievable story. So it sounds like sounds like yours did, but I just when you were a kid, did they discuss all the Holocaust stories with you? I mean,
I am really lucky that my parents told us things when I was age appropriate.
okay.
And so I didn't learn about a lot of things till I was, in my teens when I started asking, and my parents told me. I'm lucky. I had some friends whose parents never told them anything,
Right.
and I
I've
certainly
interviewed a lot of
respect.
children of survivors, and it's always mixed. That there are
Correct.
parents who never talked about it at all. Right.
Correct. Yes, it is very mixed, and my so on my mother's side, an older sister got out as well, and then one other family member survived. And on my father's side, his mother, father, sister, brother, through law, as most stories of the Shoah are, they're very complicated. And so they got out to Maastricht in Holland. And then in August of 1942, were deported to Westerbork camp. And then in November of 1942, deported to Auschwitz and murdered upon arrival. One cousin got out and one aunt survived in Germany. She had married a Christian man and somehow stayed under the radar. So he was able to see her one more time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So what was your family life like? Were you like regard to Judaism? Were you
Right.
at all? Because I've also
Yeah.
had mixed with that because a lot of people
Correct.
stop believing at all.
Right.
And,
Right. I think it runs the gamut, among most of my friends. I guess today you would say we were conservadox. My father, he had a very complicated relationship with God, needless to say. And once he asked me, why didn't God let me save my family? And I was just heartbroken at that question, because it's something that we all have considered at some point, and you can come up with all the rational reasons and these kinds of things, but it was so heartfelt that I really I had nothing to say. But he still went to shul, and he loved to lead services, and he was involved. He actually was the head of the men's Chevra Kadisha, the burial society. My mother was the head of the women's. She taught me to do it. And most of them, I think, because 6 million had no burial, that they felt kind of compelled to do it. And before my maternal grandmother left Germany, she actually was part of the Chevra Kadisha, and she used to make the tachrichim, the robes, and so she made them for the family that was left behind. So it was a long-standing family tradition, and my mother taught me, and it's something, I guess, a way of, at least for me, I can't really say why my parents did it, but it was a way of giving back, and that now at least we can help these people have a proper burial.
That's great. So your neighborhood where you grew up, there was like a Jewish presence there then?
Yes, there was a Jewish community. There were some survivors. There was a whole range of people where we grew up.
So when you were growing up, so when did you first start taking an interest, I guess, in writing? Like what helped spark that? And when did you, more importantly, when did you realize that you had a talent for it, I guess?
Right. I think I was always the kid who liked to read. I was actually just talking about this with somebody yesterday, how people don't go to the library anymore. And we went to the library every week and took out books. And Pippi Longstocking and whatever we had. And in school, oh my God, I can't remember the name of the book, but you got this magazine where you could order books. So we read all the time. I still have some of the Dr. Seuss books that my parents read to me, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. I still have those. And so I was always a reader, and I thought that I could write things. My mother, I think, thank you, Mom, saved a poem that I wrote when I was about 7 or 8 about loveliness and hateliness. But I think it was kind of always there. What I've come to realize is that this is just how I came into the world. And I always thought that I would write short stories, maybe the great American novel and all these kinds of things. But when I was taking fiction writing classes and things like that, it always came up short. We had one teacher said, write about a woman going through a door. And the woman next to me she had started an entire novel. And I pretty much had the woman went through the door to the other side. And the teacher said, I think you should really try poetry. And I went, oh. And then it just seemed to really work. I got accepted into a poetry workshop with Mary Stuart Hammond of blessed memory now, who took me in, and that's why I'm the poet that I am today. And I think what poetry does, it allows you to say things and it allows you to not say things. And what's not said and what's not on that page is just as important and maybe even more important. And you think about every word. There's this joke about the poet, what did you do today? I spent the morning putting the comma in and the afternoon taking the comma out. And those small details really, really appeal to me because, as I talked about in the beginning, when I saw this truck that had drink Coca-Cola on it, I really thought my head was going to explode. And then I figured out why and to why be a poet. And because it just allows you to say things in different ways. And that's not to take away from other kinds of writing. Just that it spoke to me, right. It speaks to trying to write about the Holocaust, to write about something that really defied language and destroyed it in some ways. So poetry it's always there. People were writing poetry during the Shoah.
Right.
Yeah.
So just curious, so who are some of your influences growing up in this?
In poetry?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. So there are, of course, Shakespeare. I remember reading lots of Shakespeare in high school. And then as I got more into poetry, there are, my teacher, Mary Stuart Hammond, is a spectacular poet, really inspired me as well. People like, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting that question. Stanley Kunitz, an amazing poet who wrote a lot about nature, those kinds of things. And then just reading as much as I could get my hands on. Some Hebrew poets, Zelda, that just start speaking. Aharon, it is, there's a fiction writer who actually did inspire me a lot, Aharon Appelfeld, who was a child survivor. And the way that he writes is with memory, kind of elusive and coming and going, and in a very poetic way. Yehuda Amichai, I think, was really, truly an amazing poet. Some of the medieval Spanish poets and that. So, and then everybody and anybody. And Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss.
I love Dr. Seuss as well. Well,
yeah.
So let me see. Your first poetry collection was How to Spot One of Us. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Right. So from what I read, it draws heavily on Holocaust themes and your family's history. So just how difficult was it for you to kind of revisit that and mix in your narrative, your stories with in putting it into a poetry?
Yeah, I think it started, I was the kid who asked a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. I realized pretty early on that my parents had a life before the Holocaust. I never did. And my friends never did. Whether Jewish, not, whatever, this was now part of the history. And so I wanted to know, I asked about the house and the food and what the yard was like and what school was like. I was really interested in those tiny little things, which I think is what poetry does. It takes that one moment and then kind of goes from there. And luckily, my parents did answer pretty much all of my questions. There were times I knew I had to stop. There were things that were my father's alone. I say him because he was older, so he thought about more in a psychological, philosophical way. My mother was 6 years old, so it was different. But she understood trauma because she was traumatized. She understood that. My father also traumatized, but could think about it in a different way. So we had talks, where would you be if this hadn't happened? I knew that my parents would not have met in Germany, and I'm only here because of the Shoah. And that felt like a huge, huge burden in some ways. And I just kind of took it all in, and it just rumbled around. And when I would start writing poems, it sometimes started with a line, and other times it was a story, and I'd write it all out. I wasn't trying to shape a poem. I wrote the story, and then I usually cried through most of it because it was all coming out, and then I got to the work of the poem, which really did save me because I was able to write. I was just able to write that poem. And there were certain lines that in the workshop, okay, this is great. This has to come out. You have to let go of this. What are you trying to say? And how to shape it into something. And the best advice that I got from Mary Stewart was just get out of the way of the poem. Just let the story, the words, do the work. And that I'm not in many of these poems. I'm just sort of reporting when all the Steven Spielberg archives and things like that started. I asked my father if he wanted to do it, and he said, "No, you're my reporter." And so I was able to tell his whole story through poetry and my mother's.
Is it difficult to decide, I guess, what aspects of your family life or history to explore? Like, is there something that, because you're sharing a lot of intimate details and about the family. So is it difficult for you, say, hey, I don't want to include this. I want to include this, though.
Oh, yeah. They're poems that will never see the light of day. And I knew which ones to put in. And Mary Stewart she actually helped me arrange the whole book. And so there were ones that I wasn't sure of, and the ones that were great, but just didn't fit. Once they had to have a narrative. And the narrative of the book is really starting with my father's story. The book actually starts with me looking out the window of the living room and watching my father shoveling snow. And all of a sudden, the snow just turned to ashes. And that's really what happened to me. I am what they call a confessional poet. I've had maybe 5 poems that I've made up, all the rest confessional. And I just kept thinking about the snow being ashes. And the more he shoveled, the more the ashes just kept falling, and we couldn't sweep them away. And then his story, and then my mother's story, and then finally in the third section of the book, I start coming in is what does it mean to be the daughter of survivors, and how I felt about things. And then the end is just different poems that sort of finish up the book, and it wasn't, I knew something was missing. And in 2007, I had a chance to go to Holland. That's also that's like a whole podcast in itself. But I went to Holland, and I went to the last place that my family lived. And then when I came back, I wrote some poems around that, and then the book was finished. Yeah.
Well, this seems like a good part to segue into your film, after Poetry Destroys Silence. So first, for anyone who doesn't know, tell me what the film is about and what made you decide to do it.
Okay. So in the film, after Poetry Destroys Silence, in it, contemporary poets confront the Shoah, both Jewish and non-Jewish poets. And we called it After because it is about us living in its aftermath, kind of the world. The Shoah is in the news every week. There's something. It hasn't ended. And as the survivors are leaving us every day, my parents are gone now, and we wanted to do something different. The we in this is the director, Richard Kroling. And when we talked about making some kind of film, we wanted to do it in some kind of different way. He's a very artistic director. He directed Albert Einstein, How I See the World, for PBS Masters. And so we talked about doing poetry because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, were all these films, Follow Me As I Go Back to Wherever. And those were all done, the Shoah, that long series. And you can't really do those anymore. The survivors are much, much younger now and don't have those same memories. And I was particularly inspired by a quote from the writer Aaron Appelfeld, who said, "After the death of the last witnesses, the remembrance of the Holocaust must not be entrusted to historians alone. Now comes the hour of artistic creation." And to kind of remember in a different way. And there hasn't been a film that's done it through poetry and through Jewish poets, non-Jewish poets. And it's a visual type of performance documentary with commentary by poets about what poetry does, why poetry is important, and why poetry can be used to talk about the Shoah. And again, not to take away from all the books and all the research, which is incredibly important and necessary. But I think that a film like After is necessary because people need to process these things in different ways. And how here we have all these people who lived with trauma, who somehow went on. I don't know how my parents got out of bed every day. There are days I don't get it, but they went on. And I think that the film is ultimately about human resilience, the power and the courage to forge a new life, and also this value of discerning and learning from the past, that the Shoah still has a lot to teach us. It's not just in the past. It's still with us and can help make meaning in some kind of profound and creative way.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So also tell me about the process of getting it started. I mean, in getting the cast, which has great actors in it, including Melissa Leo, who I've loved since Homicide. So tell me about getting it started and then to getting it across the finish line.
Right. So we started with a couple of poems. We looked through. This was a lot of research, a lot of talking. And I do have to say it was kind of a poetic process. For most poets, we just start out with a word or a line or something and then see what happens. And so we approached that in the same way. Richard did have a lot of script and ideas for each poem. So we started first picking poems. And once you start with one, then everything else has to follow a kind of narrative that gets you to that end. And so we started with that. We read tons of poems. I put calls out for poems. And then it's just a matter of fixing the puzzle and how things work. We had an amazing casting director who got us Melissa Leo, Geza Rohrig, who is the star of the Academy Award-winning film Son of Saul. I knew a lot of poets, so I was able to get poets and to really look for work. There are many poems of the Holocaust and after that are more famous, but we were trying to go to different ways of remembering. There's something called the Ringelblum Archives out of Warsaw. As things were getting bad in the ghetto, there was a call for writings. And there's a website called Poetry from Hell, which I think is correct. And I went on there, and there's a poem that I found that has no title, no author. It's now called Like a Herd of Oxen, which is just the beginning of the first line. And when we were going, yeah, we got to do this. And Cornelius Eady, who's a multi-award-winning Pulitzer Prize nominated poet, I showed him 3 poems, and he's like, this one. And I said, yeah. And he read it so beautifully. And he said that I had to be the voice of whoever wrote this poem and to do that justice. And that was a weighty kind of task. Like all the poets and everybody who was part of this film felt how weighty the task was of what we were doing. And now whoever that poet is, we now know it. We know this poem. We also, Richard also shot a German poet who was writing about the Holocaust, and we had to white out his face due to neo-Nazi death threats. So we have a granddaughter of survivors. We have Alicia Oestreicher. We also have Edward Hirsch, who's an amazing, again, multi-award-winning poet. Taylor Mali, who was on HBO's Def Poetry Jam, writing about the Holocaust. The works of Paul Celan. And so we got a record. Richard was able to get a recording of Paul Celan doing his poem Todesfuge, Death Fugue. And that was filmed in a cave, which, so, and each shoot was poetic. Richard always had his script of what we wanted, and then something poetic always happened. Where we just went, whoa!
I'm amazed that you have a poem in there with that no one knows who wrote it, that someone wrote this poem that's included in that they might not even know this ever. That's amazing.
Right. We don't know if he or she survived. We have no idea. And it's truly an amazing poem. And every poem takes off in a different way and appeals. It's broken out into separate poems where each poem is kind of its own island with its own main character and its own way and point of view. And Richard was brilliant at doing that. And it includes lots of imagery and personal documents, photographs, some archival footage. There are no scenes of destruction. We purposely didn't want to include that. But everything is hinted at. Mm-hmm. And this world that we live in now, where we're still busy killing each other. And in one of the lines in the poem, actually my poem is that home is anywhere they let you in. And that still resonates today. It hasn't changed.
And this was named one of the best films of 2024, correct?
Yes, we were very, very lucky and pleased. And RogerEbert.com gave it a 3.5-star rating and named one of the best films. We won for Best Feature Documentary at the Montreal Independent Film Festival. The film is screening on Amazon. It's also screening.
Can I ask you where you can see it? Okay.
Yeah, Amazon.com, and also on our distributor's website, grasshopperfilm.com. Our website is after.film. And it would be great. I'd love to hear from people. And I think it's an important film that comes at this time when, another 10 years, there will be no survivors. And it's, it becomes history, as everything does. I'm not saying that, this is going to be anything different, but we need to know our histories, and we need to know how to engage with next generations. And I've shown a couple of poems from the film to sixth graders, and they get it, and unfortunately, poetry can seem very off-putting, but the poems in here really make an impact and are really understandable. And so...
That's great. I definitely have to check this out then. Yeah. And I urge everyone else to. But I also wanted to shift gears for a second to just focus on you for 1 second. So you teach memoir writing workshops, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
I do.
In progress, a memoir writing workshop, right. And it's for those 60 and over.
60 and over. Yeah.
So what motivated you to start teaching? That, and so what challenges, I guess, do your students have with that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think what inspired me to start teaching is actually my teacher, Mary Stewart. She was an amazing teacher who empowered all of us, was always there. And I wanted to pass it on. I really wanted to pass it on. And so I got the opportunity through the Marlene Myers and JCC in Manhattan. It's a Zoom class. So I have students from all over the country, and we write, and I truly believe that we're all in progress, that we're never there, whatever the there is. And I believe that, yes. Right? Yeah. That everybody has a story. And it's amazing to hear the stories that come out in a warm and supportive way, where people can share things and get inspired by other people. I was inspired by every other poet and all the workshops I've been in, and I am truly grateful to all of them. And so I wanted to pass that along, and there are people who have stories for years. People who are, it ranges. I have people from 60 to 97. And want to tell their story, but had no way to do that. Mm-hmm. And the film also inspired me, and Richard inspired me, of different ways of telling story. That it can be fragmented, it can be a paragraph, it can be whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be published. It can be an email, it can be a birthday card, it can be anything. So I think that the ways that we think about writing and film and all these other things can be much wider than we think they are.
Well, something that you just said now, because I'm curious about that. You talked about your own experience with this. So so as a child of Holocaust survivors, so how is exploring these themes affected your own identity, like with mental health and relationships with other people there too, and also I guess the broader Jewish community?
Right. I think that people do ask me this a lot, and in some ways it's easy to answer and hard, because this is just how I grew up. So I don't know any other way of growing up. Most of my friends were in the same boat. And we would joke that we all could have grown up in each other's homes, because there were so many similarities. And I never felt truly American. I remember once a friend who was Irish Catholic asked me what I was. So I said that I was a German Jew. I think we were about 11 or 12, so it wasn't. And she said, "No, you're just a Jew." And I so remember that I just couldn't be something else. Mm-hmm. So I always wanted to be more. And maybe that's the writer part, where you can be a lot of different things. And so growing up, I did feel different. Most writers will always say, there were times you were on the outside looking in. That's just, like ding, ding, ding. Guess what?
Sure.
You're a writer. And so that helped. And also then I needed to find other people who I could relate to in those ways. I did relate to children who were, friends of mine who were children of non-Jewish immigrants because we had more in common. I always related more to Europeans of any kind. And, when I would meet other Europeans, I'm like, yeah, I know this, because I wasn't particularly raised American. I remember when we went to school and other kids were talking about spaghetti and meatballs, and I couldn't have been more than, 7 or 8 or something. And my mother made it one night, and my father looked at it and went, what is this? So it was this encounter. And as most children of survivors and, being American born, we had also to help our parents kind of navigate, not that they didn't need it 100%, but there were things about America that they didn't quite understand. So I think that we're in this interesting spot. And this is just who I am in the world. I can be a lot of things. I can be the daughter of survivors. I can be an opera lover. I can be, love to read books of any sort and love plants and all sorts of things. But perhaps, I actually haven't thought about this a lot, but perhaps at the core, that's who I am. I am a daughter of Holocaust survivors. That really is probably my core identity, and everything flows from there. And I give my parents a lot of credit because they could have hated easily, and they were certainly entitled to that, but they chose to love. And they loved, they loved my brother and me. They loved every kid on the street. They, were just, somehow all the kids in the neighborhood ended up in our yard a lot. And I don't know. I don't know where that love came from. And all I can try to do is pass that along.
Did they get to see your poetry regarding their thoughts?
Yeah. Yes. Both my parents were alive when the book came out, and they were thrilled. My mom was alive through pretty much all of the filming. She saw most of it, but not when that film actually came out. And she's actually in it. My mother's in my poem part of the film. And she looks beautiful. So I'm incredibly grateful. Those were my gifts to my parents for leading amazing lives, and for going on.
Well, let me ask you what you're working on next.
Oh, yeah. So I'm working on a lot of things. We're starting to begin After Two, which doesn't really have a title at this moment besides After Two, poems of current wars. So stay tuned for that. People can go on the website and sign up for getting occasional updates. We won't bother you. So we're working on that. I'm also working on a couple of things. One is a a poem length book about my year of Avelut, when my father died, that year of Jewish mourning. And so I'm working on that. And I'm also writing essays about grief from a Jewish perspective. And so those are the big things that I'm working on. And I'm teaching that class. And I'm really busy with creative things that just keep me happy.
Well, that's good. So once more, people can find the film on Amazon, and where else?
It's on Amazon, and then again, it's also on grasshopperfilm.com. And if you go on the website, www, which I don't think anyone uses anymore, but after.film, you'll see all the information. And we are showing in various places. If you'd like us to come and show for your organization, we've shown it Kean University Holocaust Center. We've shown at Fordham University. We're showing at Yale University in April. So we're showing at a lot of places. We've been in various theaters. And so we love, and we always have panel discussions, writing workshops. It's not just, hey, we made a film, go see it. But we're still involved in this and what it can mean to various communities.
Well, I hope you get a showing down in South Florida. So
Okay, me too. It'd be great to meet you.
How can people follow you on social media?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I am on Facebook, and the After page is also on Facebook. I am on Instagram under Janet K. Poet. Okay. Shows you how much I'm on that. And I have a website. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. JanetKWorks.com. So you can always find me there, and I'd love to hear from people.
Well, Janet, thank you for taking the time to come on today.
You.
I appreciate it. It was a pleasure getting to know you and talk to you.
And you too.
Yes, again, the film is After, and look it up. Make sure you see it. And again, thank you. So let me sign this off. Again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Janet Kirchheimer. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.